They said I was a failure, that I'd never make anything of myself. I didn't argue. I didn't fight back. I just smiled quietly, because I already knew something they didn't, something that would flip everything upside down. But before we get to that, let me take you back a few months. Back to the moment I heard my own mother say, "That failure is not going to achieve anything," as she poured coffee for my sister in our kitchen. She didn't know I was standing right outside the doorway. If you're someone who's ever been underestimated by your own family, someone who's been pushed aside, ignored, or told your dreams were too big, then this story is for you. Hit that subscribe button and stick around. What happened next changed everything. My name is Kelly Dawson. I'm 31 years old, single, and, according to my family, still finding myself. They don't know I already found myself years ago. They just never bothered to look close enough to notice. To them, I'm still the girl who couldn't finish med school because of anxiety attacks. The girl who left law school after one semester. The girl who switched majors 3 times and worked at a bookstore while everyone else was climbing some invisible ladder to success. They never asked what I was working on at night, what I was building when the rest of the world was asleep. Instead, they looked at my sister Erin, bright, polished, predictable Erin, and saw the golden child, Harvard graduate MBA, engaged to a senior partner at her firm. Everything our parents wanted in a daughter, wrapped in a glossy LinkedIn profile. So when I said I'd landed a job interview at Corvex Media, one of the fastest growing digital branding firms in the country, they barely reacted. "Oh," my dad said. "Well, fingers crossed. Don't get your hopes up." My mom nodded vaguely, already scrolling through wedding venues with Erin. They had no idea I'd been consulting for Corvex behind the scenes for over a year under a pseudonym, helping them fix internal branding strategies and developing a quiet but powerful reputation with the board. They didn't know because I never told them. Why? Because when you grow up in a family where love is transactional, where approval only comes after success, you learn to move in silence. You learn to keep your victories private because announcing them only invites sabotage. And I learned that the hard way. 2 weeks before my official interview at Corvex, I overheard the conversation that would change everything. I'd stopped by my parents' house to return a casserole dish. Harmless, routine. I was walking through the side gate when I heard my name. "She applied at Corvex," my mom said with a sigh. "I just don't see it happening. That failure is not going to achieve anything. You, on the other hand, you'd be perfect there. Maybe you should reach out to someone on LinkedIn. Mention our family name." I froze. Not because it hurt. It didn't. Not anymore. I'd heard versions of it my whole life. What shocked me was how casually she said it. Like it was obvious. Like I wasn't even worth discussing. That night, Erin posted a picture of herself at a gala, tagged Corvex Media as a sponsor, and captioned it, "Dream job. Let's see where this goes." She was trying to leapfrog me. Again. And for once, I didn't stop her. Because this time, I didn't need to fight. The board had already voted. The acquisition paperwork was already signed. And in 10 business days, Corvex Media would no longer be a private firm. It would be mine. I had spent the past 3 years slowly acquiring controlling interest through quiet investors, shell firms, and private trusts. No one saw it coming. No one knew the woman behind the strategy deck was me. And now my own family was trying to sneak through the back door of a company I owned. So I let them. I watched as Erin suddenly became interested in media and branding. I nodded politely as Mom gave her tips on how to impress a real CEO. I didn't say a word when Dad bragged about how Erin would be a great face for Corvex's new division. I just kept taking notes. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't loud. It isn't dramatic. It's quiet. Precise. A slow burn leading to the moment when they realize they played themselves. And that moment was coming. At the next family dinner, Erin raised her glass and said, "To new beginnings. You never know where life might take you." Everyone smiled. My mom winked. My dad clapped her on the back. I just sipped my water and smiled. Because I already knew where life was taking her. Straight into my office. and she was about to find out the hard way that the failure they ignored now signed the contracts. The official interview at Corvex Media was set for Monday morning at 10 a.m. sharp. Erin had spent the entire weekend helping me prepare, under the guise of sisterly support. "Kelly, you need to tone down the tech talk," she said, sipping her matcha latte as we sat on my couch. "CEOs want charisma, not algorithms. Maybe wear that blue blouse that hides your arms." I nodded, biting my tongue. She thought I needed her advice. She thought I was walking into that interview as just another desperate candidate. What she didn't know was that I had personally reviewed the list of interviewees the night before and added her name myself. Because I wanted her there. See, I'd learned something in the past decade. People reveal their true character when they think you're beneath them, and I wanted to see what Erin would do when she thought I was competing with her. Spoiler alert, she didn't disappoint. That morning, I walked into the Corvex lobby 20 minutes early just to watch. Erin was already there, standing near reception in a sharp white blazer, hair perfectly styled, scrolling through her phone like she owned the place. She didn't even look up when I approached. "You made it," she said, her voice flat. "That's great. Just be confident, okay? Even if it's not your thing." She still thought this was a contest. Still thought she had the edge. We were both led upstairs by the same assistant. She thought it was a coincidence. It wasn't. I had scheduled our interviews back-to-back for a reason. Erin went in first. I sat in the waiting area, flipping through an old issue of Adweek while she presented her polished pitch deck and made vague references to strategic alignment and personal branding. I'd heard it all before, and so had the board. After 15 minutes, she walked out, chin high. "They seemed impressed," she whispered as she passed me. "Good luck, Kel." Then it was my turn. I stepped into the same glass-walled conference room, but this time the air shifted. Every board member rose when I entered, not because I was a candidate, but because I was the owner. "Miss Dawson," Marcus, the chairman, said with a faint smile. "Shall we begin?" I nodded and sat, not across from them, but at the head of the table. The cameras were rolling, every angle carefully recorded, not for evaluation, but for documentation. This was a formality, a performance, and I played my part perfectly. I spoke clearly and calmly about my vision for Corvex: transparent leadership, ethical branding, authentic storytelling. I referenced data only I had access to. I answered every question like I'd written it. Because I had. After 20 minutes, I stood, shook hands, and said, "Thank you all for your time. I look forward to leading this team into the next phase." As I stepped out of the room, I saw Erin by the elevator, still waiting, assuming I was being interviewed by upper management. She looked surprised to see me smile so confidently. "They asked some good questions," I said, breezing past her. She laughed awkwardly. "Well, let's hope one of us gets the job." I nodded. "Oh, I'm sure one of us will." That night, our family group chat lit up. Mom: "Erin, any news yet?" "Fingers crossed for you, sweetheart." Dad: "Kelly, maybe this is good practice for next time. Proud of you for trying." Erin: "They said they'd call by Friday." I didn't respond, because I already knew what Friday would bring. Friday morning, Erin was at the breakfast table, refreshing her inbox every few minutes. Our parents hovered nearby like stage parents waiting for curtain call. At 9:03 a.m., her phone rang. She answered on speaker. "Hi, this is Ava from Corvex. We wanted to thank you for interviewing earlier this week." Erin sat straighter. "But we've decided to go in a different direction. We really appreciate your time and interest." There was a beat of silence. "Oh," Erin said quietly. "Okay, thank you." The call ended. Her face went blank. They said, "No." Mom blinked, confused. "But your interview went so well." I poured my coffee, leaning against the counter. Sometimes it's not about the performance. It's about the right fit. Erin looked up, and for a second, our eyes locked. Something flickered in her expression. Confusion, then suspicion. I smiled gently. Better luck next time. But the real show? That was still coming, because the formal announcement, naming me CEO of Corvex Media, was scheduled for Monday at 8 a.m. And this time, no one in my family would be able to pretend they didn't see it coming. If you've ever dreamed of the moment when people finally see who you really are, after years of underestimating you, doubting you, dismissing you, then you'll understand exactly how I felt that Monday morning. The email went out at 7:58 a.m. sharp. Subject line: Leadership announcement, Corvex Media's new CEO. It landed in inboxes across the company, hit LinkedIn feeds like wildfire, and sent a ripple through our industry network. Within minutes, texts started pouring in from old contacts, former bosses, forgotten friends, suddenly remembering my name. But the message that made me pause wasn't from a business partner. It was a group text from Mom. Mom, is this a joke? Kelly? Then, Erin, wait, are you the Kelly Dawson they just named as CEO? Please tell me this is some kind of glitch. I didn't respond. I let the silence speak for me. At 8:10 a.m., I walked into the Corvex building, not as a visitor, not as an interviewee, not as someone hoping to impress the higher-ups. I was the higher-up. Staff were already gathered in the main atrium. The company always did internal announcements in person, streamed live to remote workers and satellite offices. A camera crew stood off to the side. My assistant, Ray, handed me a sleek folder with the printed statement. "Whenever you're ready," she whispered. I took a breath, stepped up to the podium, and looked out at the crowd. Hundreds of employees, board members, team leaders. People who, until now, had only seen me as a consultant or strategist. "Good morning," I said calmly. "You may have heard by now that Corvex Media has appointed a new CEO. That CEO is me." A few gasps, mostly silence. I've spent the last year working quietly within these walls, watching, listening, building. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to understand this company from the inside, from your perspective. People were leaning forward now, paying attention. Corvex has always been about bold stories and authentic voices, but somewhere along the way we started chasing safe ideas, predictable leaders, empty titles. I believe we're ready for more. A beat. My name is Kelly Dawson. I own Corvex Media, and I plan to run it with transparency, courage, and the kind of innovation this industry forgot it needed. Applause began in the front row, then more, then louder. Ray gave me a small nod. The team knew who I was now. No more hiding. But I wasn't doing this just for them. I was doing it for the girl who used to cry in her room after every family dinner, wondering why she always felt like the disappointment. For the woman who stayed silent while her own mother said she'd never achieve anything. For every underestimated voice that learned to rise in silence. After the meeting, I returned to my office. That's when the messages really started flooding in. Dad, why didn't you tell us? Mom, we're shocked. You blindsided us, Kelly. Erin, you humiliated me. I was just trying to help you. You made me look like a fool. I stared at that last message for a long time. Erin was right about one thing. She did look like a fool. But I hadn't made her look that way. She had done that all on her own. By dismissing me. By trying to edge me out. By treating me like the stepping stone in her polished little story. Still, I didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, I asked Ray to schedule a formal family meeting for Wednesday night. At my office. Full access badges, reserved conference room. And yes, I had it recorded. Because if they were going to confront me, I wanted everything documented. I wanted a record of what they said when the masks came off. Wednesday arrived faster than I expected. Erin walked in first, face tight, steps sharp. She wore the same blazer from her interview as if trying to reclaim that version of herself. Mom followed close behind, her expression unreadable. Dad came last, carrying that awkward, half-proud, half-panicked look I knew too well. They sat across from me at the long conference table, surrounded by glass walls and silence. "So," Mom started, folding her hands. "This is real?" "It is," I replied. "You should have told us," Dad said, his voice stiff. "We're your family." Aaron scoffed. "Was this your idea of a joke? Letting me apply? Letting me think I had a shot?" I met her eyes. "You did have a shot. Just not the one you thought." Mom leaned forward. "We were blindsided, Kelly. We had no idea you were capable of this." I nodded. "I know. That's why I never told you. I wanted to see who'd show up when they thought I had nothing. And now they had. The people who once dismissed me had walked into my office, sat at my table, and were finally facing the version of me they refused to believe existed. But the best part? They still didn't know what was coming next. The room was too quiet. 3 people sat across from me, eyes flickering between anger, confusion, and something they would never admit out loud. Fear. For the first time in their lives, they had no control over the room. I did. Mom crossed her arms. "You think this is some kind of payback, don't you?" "No," I said calmly. "I think this is a long overdue conversation, one you've avoided for 31 years. Aaron's jaw clenched. "If you wanted to prove something, you could have just told us. But this? Publicly blindsiding us? That's cruel, Kelly." I tilted my head slightly. "You mean like applying for a job at a company you thought I was interviewing for, and then trying to edge me out with backdoor recommendations to the board?" Her eyes widened. "I didn't—" "Yes, you did," I cut in, holding up a printed email chain. "You contacted 3 board members and tried to position yourself as a better cultural fit. You mentioned my lack of formal leadership and your Harvard network. Do you want me to read it out loud?" Aaron's mouth opened, then closed again. Mom looked between us, stunned. Dad sighed heavily and leaned back in his chair. "I was trying to help you," Aaron mumbled. "I just thought you were overreaching." I raised an eyebrow. "Or maybe you thought I was still the girl in the basement, editing blog copy for startups and failing every big thing I tried. Maybe you wanted to believe I needed saving so you could feel like the successful one." "You don't know what you're saying," Mom snapped, her voice sharper now. "We have supported you. All those times you needed money?" "No," I said, my voice low but steady. "You gave me money as a reminder of how much I was failing. Every dollar came with a lecture. Every favor came with strings. You didn't support me. You tolerated me. There's a difference." They fell silent again. The only sound was the faint hum of the AC and the ticking clock behind me. I stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, letting the city skyline fill the space between us. "I didn't build Corvex to prove you wrong," I said, still facing the glass. "I built it to prove myself right, that I was capable, that I was worth something, that I didn't need validation to create value." I turned slowly. But somewhere along the way, I realized I did want one thing: to stop hiding. To stop pretending I was less than I am just to make you comfortable. Aaron's eyes glistened. "So what now? Are we enemies?" "No," I said. "We're not enemies, but we're no longer playing a game where I pretend you didn't try to undermine me." Dad finally spoke. "You've made your point, Kelly. You're successful. We get it. So what do you want from us?" I walked back to my seat and sat down, folding my hands neatly on the table. "I want acknowledgement," I said clearly. "Not applause, just the truth. I want you to admit that you tried to sabotage my success, that you never believed in me, and that everything you said behind my back came from your own discomfort, not my lack of ability." Mom stared at me like I had grown horns. "That's absurd." Aaron shook her head. "I'm not going to sit here and say I didn't believe in you. I just didn't expect this." "Exactly," I replied. "And that's the problem." There was a long pause. Then Dad cleared his throat. You were always different, Kelly. Not worse, just harder to understand. We didn't know how to support you. That, at least, sounded honest. Mom stood abruptly. Well, I don't know what else you expect from us. We came. We listened. If you want to keep digging up old wounds, that's your choice. She walked toward the door, but I stopped her with one last sentence. You never saw me because I made you uncomfortable, I said quietly. And you couldn't admit that the child you looked down on was building something bigger than anything you imagined. She didn't turn around, just stood there, motionless. Then Erin stood too. I don't know how to fix this, she whispered. But maybe I wasn't the only one pretending. That hit harder than I expected. They left without saying goodbye. Dad lingered a second longer, gave me a nod that felt more like an apology than anything else, and followed them out. The conference room felt lighter after they left, like the air had cleared. But inside me, a storm was just starting to calm. They knew now. They'd seen it. They couldn't unsee it. And they couldn't rewrite it this time. I'd walked into the room as the version of myself they refused to believe existed, and I left with something even more powerful than their approval. Freedom. The thing about revealing your success to people who were invested in your failure? They don't handle it well. After the meeting, I thought my family would step back, reflect, maybe even apologize. But I had underestimated just how fragile their pride really was. The next morning, my LinkedIn inbox was flooded. Not from industry contacts or old college friends, but from people I barely knew with one thing in common: my mother. She had started reaching out to concerned colleagues, telling them I'd manipulated my way into the CEO role, that I'd used unfair connections and cutthroat tactics to steal what rightfully belonged to someone more qualified. Translation: Erin. One message in particular caught my attention. Hey Kelly, I'm not sure if you're aware, but your mom has been making some interesting comments on a private Facebook group for alumni professionals. Might want to check it out. I did. And there it was, a carefully crafted post filled with thinly veiled barbs. It's heartbreaking when family becomes obsessed with revenge instead of gratitude. Success should be shared, not used as a weapon against those who supported you for years. Hundreds of likes, dozens of sympathetic comments, a few even from former teachers who had once called me promising but unmotivated. The narrative had shifted. Not to, look what Kelly achieved, but poor Erin, poor family, look what they have to deal with. I should have been angry. I should have fought back. Instead, I decided to wait. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. People reveal their true nature when you take away their ability to control your story. I didn't engage publicly. I didn't comment, repost, or send a single message. I let them talk. Let them shape their version of reality. But behind the scenes, I was documenting everything. Emails, screenshots, voice messages Erin left on my phone late at night, ranging from pleading to furious. You think this changes anything? You're still not the success story. You just got lucky. You think this is over? Watch. At first, I thought it was just emotional whiplash. Erin processing her loss of control. But then something more serious surfaced. An anonymous message was sent to Corvex's HR department. It accused me of falsifying my resume, misreporting past company acquisitions, and coercing the board into promoting me. The email came with a Google Doc full of evidence. It was clumsy, obvious, a mix of outdated records and doctored screenshots. But still, protocol meant we had to investigate it, officially. I met with Marcus, the board chair, privately. It's clearly fabricated, he said, tossing the packet on the table. But we'll run through the motions to keep the optics clean. I nodded. Any idea where it came from? He didn't answer, just gave me a look. One that said, we both know exactly where this came from. It wasn't just a tantrum anymore. It was sabotage. and that changed everything. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, the city lights flickering through the window. I stared at the ceiling, the document folder in my lap, and realized something that stunned me. I wasn't hurt anymore. Not like I used to be. I wasn't the girl wondering why she was never good enough. I wasn't the one crying in secret because her parents only bragged about her sister. I wasn't even mad. I was just done. Done hoping they'd come around. Done trying to earn their respect. Done shrinking to make them comfortable. So I made one final decision. The next morning, I called Corvex's legal department. I authorized them to send a cease and desist letter to anyone making false statements about the company or its leadership, whether family or not. Then I sent a message directly to Aaron. You've made your point. I'm not here to fight you, but if you continue to target my career, I will take legal action, and I won't hesitate. She didn't respond, but the post stopped. The calls stopped. And for the first time in years, the noise finally faded. Sometimes the loudest statement you can make isn't with words, it's with boundaries. And that's what I'd done. I didn't destroy my family. They did that themselves the moment they chose pride over love, control over support. But I did reclaim something far more important than their approval: my peace. And as Corvex grew, as my team flourished, and as I sat in my office reviewing proposals for partnerships with companies I once dreamed of working for, I felt it. A quiet, unshakable kind of power. Not spiteful, not bitter, just earned. Because despite everything they said, everything they tried, everything they threw in my path, the failure they mocked became the CEO they never saw coming. 6 months later, I barely recognized my own life. Corvex Media had doubled in size, expanding its reach into global markets, onboarding clients we used to dream about landing. We were building not just a company, but a movement, one that prioritized integrity, innovation, and real leadership. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. No whispered criticism. No carefully hidden insults wrapped in advice. No passive-aggressive questions at family dinners about when I'd get a real job. Just silence. The kind that follows a storm. The kind that lets you breathe. I didn't hear from Erin for a while. Not directly. But I heard about her. She'd quietly left her old job. Word was, some hiring managers had caught wind of the false accusations she'd tried to spread. The corporate world is smaller than most people think. Reputation travels faster than gossip. As for my parents, they didn't call, didn't text, didn't show up at Corvex's holiday gala, even though it was held just 15 minutes from their home. But then, one Sunday morning, an envelope arrived at my apartment. No return address. Just my name, written in neat, familiar cursive. Inside was a letter from my mother. Kelly, I've rewritten this letter more times than I can count. I know we haven't spoken since the meeting. I'm not sure if you even want to hear from me now. But I want you to know something. You were right. I didn't see you. Not really. I was too busy projecting my own fears onto you. Afraid you'd fall, afraid you'd prove me wrong, afraid that the quiet one in the corner might shine brighter than the golden one I was so proud of. You didn't need our support to succeed, but I now see that you deserved it. And I'm sorry you didn't get it. Whatever happens next, just know. I see you now. Mom, I read it 3 times. Not because I was moved to tears. Not because I needed her words to validate anything. But because for the first time, it sounded like her voice. Not the curated version she used at church socials or brunch with Aaron's friends. Not the one layered with pride and appearances. Just honesty. That evening, I placed the letter in a drawer in my office. Not on display. Not framed. Just filed. Like a chapter I'd finally finished reading. Later that week, Aaron reached out. A short message typed plainly. I'm working at a startup now. Entry level. Trying to learn things the hard way. You were right. I needed to be knocked down to see what I'd been standing on. If you're ever open to it, I'd like to grab coffee sometime. No expectations, just two people starting over. I didn't say yes, but I didn't delete it either, because growth looks different for everyone. And sometimes the apology isn't a sentence, it's a shift in behavior. And me? I was still building a legacy without asking permission, running a company not from a place of revenge, but vision. I no longer needed the people who once doubted me to believe in me. I had become the kind of woman who didn't just command respect. She earned it. Quietly, powerfully, relentlessly. I still think about that moment in the kitchen, when I heard my mother say, "That failure is not going to achieve anything." If only she knew what she was igniting in that moment. Because some fires don't roar. Some burn quietly, steadily, beneath the surface until the day they consume everything in their path. My story isn't about revenge. It's about recognition of who you are, of what you've survived, of what you can create when you stop waiting for applause and start building in silence. To anyone watching this who's been underestimated, who's been pushed aside, who's been told you'll never be good enough, hear me when I say, you don't need their permission. You don't need their validation. You only need to believe in the version of you they're too afraid to see. Because one day they'll walk into a room and realize the failure they once mocked now owns the building. And trust me, that moment is worth everything. Thank you for listening to my story. Now I want to hear yours. Leave a comment. Have you ever been doubted by the people closest to you? What did you do when they tried to hold you back? Let's turn this space into something more than just stories. Let's build a community where every failure becomes a force. Because your story matters, and your success is just getting started. They say betrayal cuts deepest when it comes from family. I used to think that was just something people said in movies or books. But in that moment, sitting at the long mahogany boardroom table across from the man who raised me, I felt the full weight of those words crash into my chest like a freight train. The room smelled like old leather and polished ambition. On the wall behind my father hung a massive photograph of the original warehouse, the birthplace of the business he'd built from the ground up. He used to say, "This company is the legacy I'll leave behind." What he didn't say, apparently, was that I wouldn't be part of that legacy. My name is Emma Reed. Until yesterday, I was the Director of Technology and Innovation at Reed Industrial Solutions, the family business. I spent 10 years helping expand it from a dusty regional supplier to a nationwide logistics powerhouse, integrating systems, streamlining operations, and designing proprietary tech that gave us a competitive edge in a cutthroat industry. I worked side by side with my father. I skipped vacations, birthdays, even my own engagement party to make this company what it is. And yet, there I sat, watching him lean back in his chair, steeple his fingers, and smile as he said, "Your brother is taking over the family business. You're no longer needed." The words didn't come with anger. There was no dramatic shouting or table slamming, just a cold, calculated sentence, one he'd clearly rehearsed. Around the table sat the company's board members, senior executives, and my younger brother, Noah. He didn't look at me. He just stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, wearing the navy blue suit I'd picked out for him during his first job interview here 3 years ago. The same brother who'd once cried on the phone asking me to help him prepare for his first investor pitch. "Dad," I said quietly, calmly, "I'm sorry. Can you repeat that?" He nodded as if this were a shareholder update, not a personal ambush. "Noah has shown great promise, and we feel he's ready to take the reins. The board has approved the transition. You'll be stepping down effective immediately." I felt the eyes around the table shift toward me, curious, cautious, but not surprised. They'd known. They'd all known. I inhaled slowly. Then I stood up. "All right," I said, my voice steady. "Understood." Noah finally looked at me then. Maybe he expected me to scream, to cry, to beg. but I just opened my laptop, clicked a few keys, and said, "The demo file for tomorrow's investor presentation is on the shared drive. All yours." I handed my laptop to the IT manager without another word. "Enjoy the investor demo tomorrow," I added with a faint smile, then turned on my heel and walked out. I didn't look back. I didn't have to. Because 10 minutes after that meeting ended, a line of hidden code I had quietly embedded into the demo would activate. Not to destroy anything, but to reveal something. Something my father and brother didn't know I had been collecting for the last 6 months. It started when I noticed access logs at odd hours, files copied without explanation. I installed tracking software, security tripwires, and a watchdog protocol hidden inside our flagship product's interface. What I found? Emails, documents, meetings I hadn't been invited to, planning sessions where my own ideas were presented, without my name attached. It wasn't just betrayal. It was theft, polished with nepotism and served with a smile. I had been building the future of the company while they were building a future without me. So I stopped trying to fight for a seat at a table that was already being cleared for someone else. I prepared instead. Not out of vengeance, but self-preservation. Because the product they planned to showcase tomorrow, the AI-powered logistics optimization tool that secured our biggest contracts, was my creation. Not my father's, not Noah's, and certainly not theirs to steal without consequence. Back in my apartment that night, I didn't cry. I didn't rant on the phone or post a vague status update online. I ordered Thai food, opened a bottle of wine, and pulled out my private backup drive. On the screen, a countdown timer appeared. Demo mode activation in 10 minutes. I smiled. Because they had no idea that tomorrow, in front of our top-tier investors, the system would ask for one thing before it could run: authentication from the original developer. And that developer was no longer in the building. By 9 a.m. the next morning, my phone had already buzzed 17 times. I didn't answer any of them. Voicemails from my father, 2 from Noah, 1 from Angela, the head of investor relations, and another from an unfamiliar number I recognized immediately as the private line to the boardroom. I let them pile up like unread warnings. At 9:30, I poured myself a coffee, stepped out onto my balcony, and pulled up the live investor feed on a private backup tablet. The one I'd used to simulate the platform's AI decision trees. Ironically, the very work they planned to showcase as Reed Industrial's proprietary innovation. The camera feed was crystal clear. I watched from a distance as my father stood in front of a polished screen with the words Project Helix gleaming behind him. He wore his signature red tie, the one he reserved for big meetings, and began his speech with practiced confidence. As many of you know, Reed Industrial has always been a pioneer in logistics solutions, he said. But today we're introducing something revolutionary. The presentation began as planned. A smooth, auto-guided interface explained how the AI system worked, how it could learn from warehouse behaviors, optimize routes, reduce delays, even cut costs by up to 27%. Then came the moment. 10 minutes in, the screen flickered. Just once. Then again. My father paused. A few investors shifted in their seats. The interface blinked twice and a new screen appeared. Not the one they had rehearsed. Authorization error. Original developer credentials missing. Please insert valid security token to proceed. I could practically hear the silence through the screen. My father tapped the touch screen. Once. Twice. Then looked over at the tech lead who sat frozen behind his laptop. "Is this part of the demo?" one investor asked. Then the screen changed again. "Unauthorized use detected. Developer has initiated ethical compliance protocol 7.4. Internal system logs now accessible to all stakeholders." And just like that, the logs began scrolling. Every timestamped document, every late-night access, every unauthorized meeting between Noah and a third-party consultant discussing licensing agreements before my official termination. Even email threads debating when to replace me, not if. I sipped my coffee and tilted the screen back, letting the morning sun warm my face. What I had built wasn't just smart software. It was a sentinel, one that watched and learned, not just from code, but from people. It didn't just track movement inside a warehouse. It tracked behavioral patterns, including internal misuse and ethical red flags. It was designed to protect systems from anyone, even its owners, even its creator. At 9:42 a.m., my father finally called again. This time I answered. "Emma?" he said, his voice low, like he was trying to stay calm in a room full of chaos. "What did you do?" I didn't answer right away. "You activated a lockdown on our most important presentation," he continued. "Do you have any idea what this looks like to investors?" "I do," I said. "It looks like your company tried to erase the one person who made that system possible." There was a long silence. "I didn't know Noah went behind your back," he finally said. "That wasn't the plan." I let that sit in the air for a second. "But cutting me out entirely was the plan, right?" More silence. "You didn't even ask me," I continued. "You just decided I was no longer needed. Like I hadn't sacrificed 10 years to build what you now call Project Helix." "Look," he said, softening. "Maybe we rushed things. There's still a seat at the table for you." "No," I said firmly. "There isn't. Not anymore." I hung up, and that's when the next notification came through on my private interface. Ethical violation report sent to stakeholders. Complete. It wasn't about destroying the company. It was about revealing the truth. I had set the system to copy the full internal ethics report to every investor's inbox. Not out of malice, but transparency. They deserved to know what kind of leadership they were backing, what kind of behavior was being hidden behind red ties and boardroom smiles. By 11 a.m., 3 board members had resigned. 2 investors pulled their offers, and the rest requested an emergency ethics review before proceeding with any further funding. I didn't celebrate. This wasn't a victory. Not yet. But it was clarity. For the first time in months, I wasn't questioning whether I was overreacting. I wasn't gaslighting myself into silence. I had told the system to protect itself, to protect what we built. And it had listened. People always see the outcome. Success, disruption, retaliation. But rarely do they see the years behind it. The quiet sacrifices, the exhaustion that never quite leaves your bones. The Sunday dinners missed, the relationships strained, the nights you fall asleep at your desk with code still dancing behind your eyes. That was my life for nearly a decade. After finishing my degree in systems engineering, I had offers from Google, IBM, and 2 venture-backed startups. But I chose the family business, Reed Industrial Solutions, because I believed in what my father had built. I believed I could take it further. Back then, the company was struggling to modernize. My father didn't understand automation, machine learning, or even cloud architecture. He was old school. He believed in handshakes, ledgers, and loyalty. Or so I thought. I didn't come in demanding a title or salary. I started low. Project consultant, then lead developer, then tech strategist. Each year, I built something new. Inventory mapping software, warehouse automation, smart routing systems. And eventually, Helix. Though that wasn't its name then. Helix began as a side project. An AI trained to detect inefficiencies in supply chains. But over time, it evolved. It started predicting disruptions before they happened. Shipment delays, vendor fraud, internal leaks. It wasn't just optimization. It was protection. I showed it to Noah once, back when he was still just the kid trying to help out. He'd come to my office late at night, watching me build neural pattern maps on whiteboards and scribble logic chains in the margins of my coffee-stained notebooks. "This is insane," he'd said once, watching Helix reroute a delivery chain in real time after predicting a labor strike. "It's like the AI can see the future." "No," I said. "It sees patterns, and it learns." At the time, he looked at me with awe. That was before the board meetings he started attending alone, before he stopped returning my messages, before the whispers started. I didn't want to believe it, not even when I found the first signs. A copy of my framework shared under Noah's credentials. A budget line item for software scaling that I hadn't approved. Meeting invites to Helix-related demos, with my name absent from the list. At first, I told myself it was a misunderstanding, that Noah was just clumsy or eager, that Dad didn't know. But when I brought it up, gently, respectfully, my father looked me in the eye and said, "Maybe it's time to let your brother take the lead on some of these initiatives. He's got a knack for business." A knack. That's what he called it. That night, I stayed in the office until 3 a.m. I stared at the source code of my own creation and thought, what if they really try to take this? What if they lock me out completely? So I began building in safeguards. Not malware, not sabotage. Just a quiet line of logic that said, if the authentication protocol doesn't match the original developer's keychain, the system locks down. Automatically. No drama, just data. I also began encrypting copies of every major development milestone and saved them off network. And I waited. Now, in the aftermath of the failed investor demo, all of it had triggered exactly as intended. Noah had called 5 times already that afternoon. I didn't answer, but I listened to one of his voicemails just to hear the tone. "Emma," he said, voice tight with tension. "We need to talk. Look, I know things got messy, but we didn't mean to shut you out. It was Dad's call, okay? I was just going along with it." Going along with it. That line echoed in my head for hours, because going along with it is how betrayal begins. Not in malice, in silence, in the choice not to speak up, not to intervene. By 4 p.m., Angela from Investor Relations emailed me directly. "Emma, several stakeholders are asking if you'll be returning to complete the Helix demo. There's a proposal forming to offer you an advisory role and a revised compensation package. Please consider responding within the next 24 hours. The board is open to renegotiation. Regards, Angela F." They were scrambling, and I could have taken the offer. I could have walked back into that office, negotiated equity, a new title, a fat check. Smiled politely and pretended we were all on the same team again. But I didn't want a seat at a poisoned table. I didn't want hush money or a fancy title that meant nothing. I wanted something more valuable. Integrity, recognition, and the power to ensure that what I built would never be used against me again. So I crafted my response with precision. "Angela, thank you for your message. I'm open to a discussion, but I won't be returning under a temporary advisory title. I'm prepared to resume leadership of the Helix project, under terms that include formal recognition as its creator, 51% IP ownership, and veto power on ethical use cases. Otherwise, the system remains inaccessible. Kindly, Emma Reed." I hit send and closed the laptop. This time, I wasn't waiting for permission. That evening, I got a dinner invitation. It came in the form of a short, formal message from my father's assistant. "Emma, your father has requested a private dinner to discuss the future of the company and your role in it. He hopes you'll join him tonight at 7 p.m. at La Vigne. A reservation has been made under Reed." Monica. La Vigne, his favorite restaurant. The same one where we celebrated the company's first $10 million quarter, back when I still believed this business was a family and not just a brand. I considered ignoring the message, but then I remembered something an old mentor once told me. Never walk away from the table when they're finally ready to admit they need you. Let them say it out loud. So I dressed sharp, arrived exactly on time, and found my father already seated at a corner table, wine glass in hand, menu untouched. He stood when he saw me. "Emma?" I nodded. "Dad?" No hugs, no fake warmth. Just silence as I took my seat across from him. He studied me as if trying to read the expression I wasn't showing. "You look well," he offered. "Strong." "I am." He cleared his throat. "You've made quite an impression the last 24 hours. "Funny," I said, tilting my head. "I've been making impressions for 10 years. You just weren't looking." That shut him up for a second. Then came the sigh. The one I knew too well. Part frustration, part forced humility. I'll admit we made some miscalculations. He began. Pushing you out was premature. I didn't respond. I wanted to see where he was going, whether he was here to apologize or to negotiate with the same manipulation he used in boardrooms. You've built something extraordinary, he continued, and we want to bring you back in. Noah agrees. The board is prepared to offer you a co-director position. Same salary as him, shared oversight of the Helix project, and a retroactive bonus package. I raised an eyebrow. That's cute. He frowned. Emma. No, I interrupted. Let's not pretend this is about fairness. You didn't come here to offer balance. You came because the system won't run without me, and the investors are threatening to walk. I leaned forward, my voice quiet but firm. You came because you lost control. He stared at me, jaw tightening. You're not being reasonable. Reasonable? I echoed. Dad, I spent a decade building your vision into something that could change an industry. I gave up everything. Security, relationships, time. And when it started working, when it became something real, you handed it to Noah like a participation trophy. His eyes narrowed. You're overreacting. Noah may not have your technical skill, but he has vision. No, he has ambition. I snapped. And you handed him mine. For a moment, we just sat there. Two people who used to be father and daughter, now just two professionals negotiating ownership of the same empire. He finally said, "What do you want?" There it was, the question I had waited for. I already told Angela, I said. I want 51% of the Helix IP, formal recognition as its creator, oversight of every implementation, and $5 million in retroactive compensation for the unauthorized use of my work. His jaw clenched. That's outrageous. That's generous, I said. I could have gone public. I could have let those internal logs hit the press. You wouldn't do that, he said, with a flash of the old confidence. Wouldn't I? I leaned back in my chair, calm as ever. You raised me to protect what I build. You just never expected I'd apply that lesson to you. He looked away for the first time all night. Maybe it was shame. Or maybe he realized that for the first time I wasn't the daughter trying to earn his approval. I was the woman who no longer needed it. The check came. He paid. As we stood, he said quietly, I'll have legal draw up the documents. I nodded. Good. And Dad? He looked up. I'm not coming back to be your employee. I'm coming back as your equal. Don't forget that. He gave a slow nod. Understood. I walked out into the night, the crisp air hitting my face like a reset button. The street was quiet. My phone buzzed with a message from Angela. Board has been informed. Drafting new terms. Congratulations. I didn't smile. Not yet. This wasn't over. But the balance of power had shifted. And for the first time in a long time, I was exactly where I needed to be. By Monday morning, the building looked exactly the same. But everything had changed. The front desk staff stood a little straighter as I walked in, and the security guard, Marcus, who used to nod without looking up, gave me a sharp, respectful, "Good morning, Ms. Reed." I nodded back, wondering how much he knew. Probably more than I thought. In my hand, I held a fresh access badge. The lanyard read Executive, Co-founder in bold silver letters. The elevator ride up felt strange. Familiar, yet foreign. Like walking through a house you used to live in before it was remodeled without your permission. My floor, formerly the innovation wing, had been rearranged. My office had been emptied, and the nameplate on the door now read, Noah Reed, Director of Strategy. I didn't bother knocking. Noah was behind my old desk, typing furiously, looking like a man on the edge. The second he saw me, his face tightened. Emma. Noah, I said calmly. Looks like you've made yourself comfortable. He stood up. You've got some nerve showing up here after what you pulled. I gave a tight smile. Funny. That's exactly what I thought when I found you presenting my work as yours. He scoffed. We were a team. No, I interrupted. We were never a team. I brought you in. I coached you through your first year. I gave you access to everything I created, and you used that trust to undermine me. I didn't plan this, he said defensively. Dad said, don't, I cut in. Don't put this on Dad. He may have given the order, but you executed it. He sat back down, exhaling through his nose. So what now? You're just back? Like nothing happened? I'm back, I said. But nothing's the same. I've reviewed the new contract. I have majority control over the Helix IP. All implementations run through me. And you are no longer authorized to touch the system. His mouth dropped slightly. That's ridiculous. You can't just... I can, I said, placing a printed copy of the agreement on the desk. And I did. He stared at the document like it had insulted him. So what? You're going to be Dad's equal now? Noah, I said gently but firmly. I'm not interested in being Dad's equal. I'm only interested in protecting what I built. If you want to work on your own projects, fine. But Helix is mine now. Officially, permanently. He sat in stunned silence. I turned to leave, then paused in the doorway. You could have just asked, you know. If you wanted to be part of it, I would have let you in. On the right terms. But instead you went behind my back. You let Dad talk you into believing you deserved something you didn't build. That kind of thinking? It has consequences. I walked out without waiting for a reply. Later that day, I sat in my new office, Spartan but functional, flipping through Helix's live reports. Since the lockdown had lifted, the system had resumed its predictive analysis, seamlessly adjusting warehouse workflows, vendor flags, and fleet routing across our logistics network. It was better than ever. Smarter. More intuitive. At 2:15 p.m., Angela knocked and entered with a list of upcoming client demos. We've had 4 new inquiries from enterprise clients since this morning, she said. Apparently word got out that the system has a real-time ethics protocol embedded. They want it. Badly. I nodded. Schedule them, but under the new transparency model. Angela raised an eyebrow. Transparency model? Yes, I said. Every implementation of Helix from this point forward includes 3 things: user accountability logs, internal ethics tracking, and quarterly compliance audits. I won't let this technology become another corporate weapon. She smiled, a little surprised. That's bold. It's necessary, I said. I've already seen what happens when power is handed to the wrong people. After she left, I leaned back in my chair. The office was quiet. For the first time in weeks, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Control. Not over other people, but over myself, my work, and the future of what I had built. I checked my inbox. There was one message waiting. From my father. Emma, I reviewed the documents. I understand the terms. You've made your position clear. For what it's worth, I'm proud of what you've built, even if I didn't show it the right way. Dad. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't care, but because sometimes silence says more than 1,000 words. And in that silence, a boundary had finally been drawn. This was no longer just a business. This was mine. 3 months later, Helix was everywhere. We had just closed our largest contract yet, an international supply chain conglomerate spanning 6 continents. Helix would be the central nervous system for their logistics infrastructure, monitoring every node in real time, predicting risks, preventing breakdowns, and doing it all under our new ethical framework. Every contract included clauses I had personally added: protections for employees, data integrity safeguards, and automatic reporting protocols that triggered when misuse was detected. I didn't just want to change the system. I wanted to change how systems were run. And the world had taken notice. I was invited to speak at industry conferences. Forbes published a feature titled "The Woman Who Rewired the Game." My inbox flooded with invitations from venture capitalists and offers to buy me out. But I wasn't selling, because this wasn't about cashing in. It was about owning what I had built and protecting it, fiercely. Inside the office, the atmosphere had shifted. People were more cautious around me at first, unsure of what my return meant. But I made it clear. I wasn't there to punish anyone. I was there to lead. Not with vengeance, but with clarity. Noah? He kept his distance. After the dust settled, he stepped back from his executive role and took on a less visible position. Strategic Partnerships Liaison. A demotion in spirit, if not in title. He avoided direct contact, though I caught him once, standing silently outside the Helix operations room, watching the monitors flicker with real-time optimization data. His face was unreadable. My father kept up appearances. He congratulated me publicly, praised my visionary leadership at shareholder meetings, and even posed with me in the company's press releases. But behind closed doors, our relationship remained professional. Not cold, but distant. Like two former generals who had survived the same war but no longer fought on the same side. And that was okay, because some scars don't need to be fixed. They need to be acknowledged, so you can move on with your armor intact. Then came the day that brought it all full circle. I was scheduled to speak at the company's annual Innovation Summit, a high-profile event where our biggest clients, stakeholders, and partners flew in from around the world. Backstage, I reviewed my talking points, took a breath, and stepped onto the stage. The lights hit me. Dozens of faces stared back, but I wasn't nervous. I was ready. 3 years ago, I began, this company nearly lost its future. Not to competitors or market crashes or tech disruption, but to something much harder to see. Internal betrayal. There was a pause in the room. Betrayal doesn't always look like sabotage. Sometimes it's quiet, a meeting you're not invited to, a decision made without your input, a credit line with your name removed. A few heads nodded, others stiffened. I didn't fight back with lawsuits or headlines. I let the system I built speak for itself, because I trusted it to tell the truth. I paused, letting that settle. And here's what I've learned. You have to protect what you build. Not just the code or the contracts, but your integrity, your ideas, your boundaries. More nods now, eyes locked in. Because if you don't protect them, someone else will take them. And they won't ask. They'll smile while they do it. They'll say it's business, that it's nothing personal. I stepped forward. Make it personal. The room was completely still. Helix didn't just predict threats. It identified patterns, and those patterns told a story. A story about what happens when innovation is treated like property instead of purpose. Another beat of silence. I'm not here because I played politics. I'm here because I prepared. Because I stayed true to what I knew was right. Even when it hurt. And that's what I want to leave you with today. I looked across the room, at the executives, the engineers, the interns. At some point, someone will try to take what you've built. They'll underestimate you, ignore you, replace you. I let that hang in the air. But remember this. Power doesn't lie in who gets the credit on the first page. It lies in who controls the next chapter. Applause broke out. Not thunderous, but sincere. After the summit, a young woman approached me. Nervous, excited, eyes full of ambition. Maybe the way I used to look at my dad. "Ms. Reed," she said, "what's the secret? To doing what you did?" I smiled, handed her the mic they'd just taken off me, and said, "Build something they can't take from you, and make sure it knows exactly who you are." That night, I got home late. Tired, wired, fulfilled. As I kicked off my heels, my phone buzzed softly. A quiet notification from the Helix system. System integrity secured. Threats neutralized. Protections active. Creator authenticated. I smiled. Not because the war was over, but because from now on I'd never have to fight it unarmed again.